is that going to be it for you, sir? Yep. Alright, your total comes out to $60.43. Did you want to sign up for our Power Up Rewards program? Not really. Well, you get a free copy of Game Informer, and we'll send more to your house once a month. Check out this month's edition. I think I'll take my business elsewhere. Game Informer, the gamer's magazine. The few times my grandma bought me some games, I always made sure to beg a little bit extra so I could get my copy of Game Informer. I especially had the Halo Reach Edition one, as I used to read it on long car rides. It felt cool, like my mom would read some kind of pop culture magazine, my dad would read his magazines but for some reason only in the bathroom, and I would read the Game Informer magazine over and over, and it kind of felt like I was a part of the older crowd. Tell me this guy doesn't have bills due on Thursday. But as I grew older and the information we received became more readily available, magazines like Game Informer slowly became irrelevant, as if I wanted to know more about Bethesda's newest title in the works, I could just look it up. That's not happening. But it's still pretty cool to look back on and reminisce about. Every now and then when I want physical media from GameStop, and if it's offered to me, although I don't take it, I'm still surprised these guys are still around. So, for the sake of nostalgia, let's take a look back at the history of Game Informer and see the incline and decline of this classic gaming magazine. The first edition debuted all the way back in 1991, starting out as a newsletter for the now defunct game retail store Funkoland, who was bought out by GameStop in 2000. It started out as a 6-page promotional magazine, only being pushed out every 2 months, but it moved to a monthly release schedule in 1994. Headed by Kathy Preston, the magazine soared to a top-selling magazine as it began to be included in the Power Up Rewards program. With the Power Up Rewards program, you'd receive the magazine in the mail once a month on top of a few other added bonuses. This isn't an advertisement for the Power Up Rewards program. I'm not particularly a fan of it, but at one time in my life I had it. And by 2010 it had become the 5th largest selling magazine in the US, and by 2011 it was 3rd. That was pretty brief. I mean, if you had to think of a gaming magazine, this was pretty much it. I mean, you got reviews, you got little stories and tidbits and previews and all this kind of fun stuff wrapped up into a magazine that you could get monthly from GameStop. Really, the only annoying thing they ever did was this thing called the Sacred Cow Barbecue. It's like a celebrity roast, and they'd basically talk smack about some of gaming's top characters, and I'm sure they meant well, it's all in good fun, but that's really it. The quote-unquote decline of Game Informer only comes from GameStop and the way that we receive information nowadays. With the introduction of eShops and online marketplaces, physical media kind of became a lost art. This ultimately led to declining sales on GameStop's part. And hot take, duh, this was bound to happen eventually. I'm not an expert on this kind of stuff, but the direction GameStop went has been studied extensively on YouTube, but in short, they fired a bunch of people, a good portion of Game Informer employees were fired, peddled out a lot of poor products, and slowly but surely dug their own grave. GameStop isn't in the grave yet, but it's not crazy to say at least one foot is in. But this isn't about GameStop, it's about Game Informer. Game Informer saw layoffs because of this whole thing, some employees who had been at the company for a long time, and one report even saying that a few were on vacation when they were laid off. Layoffs are always messy, and it's incredibly scummy of GameStop how they pulled it off. During these times, Game Informer still reigned supreme. Nintendopower was still kind of kicking it, but it was really the only source for gaming news for a lot of kids like me. But like all forms of magazines and stuff like this, even though it saw a major decline mostly attributed to the internet becoming more and more information friendly, the people that worked at Game Informer are rock stars. The reviews are honest and well put. The covers and the art they use is phenomenal, and it's just overall a pretty solid magazine. But I know you guys were waiting for a but. There's always going to be a but with this kind of stuff. But what is the point of reading that Zelda edition of Game Informer if by the time it was announced, you'd read everything online, and by the time you'd gotten your copy of Game Informer in the mail, 90% of the information you would have read was already out there and probably in more detail? Oh, come on. It's cool to read interviews from developers and catch reviews for games that I was on the fence about, but again, most of this stuff was already out there and it was more convenient to access. Game Informer is still in GameStop and their website is still kicking. I wouldn't necessarily say it's on life support, but I also wouldn't necessarily say it's selling like it used to either. And now we're in present day. According to one source, at least 50% of their staff has been cut just in this last year alone. So between running a magazine and a website, I can't imagine that's super easy. The beauty of Game Informer was in its early days, when kids like me would get a game from GameStop and then get a magazine and read it on the way home, and even before that, as I've read a few accounts of people talking about it when it was originally sold at Funkoland. Aside from media growth, the problem lies with GameStop and how it conducts business. This is in no way, shape, or form the employee's fault, but being asked multiple times to sign up for some rewards program and then you get this free magazine with it kind of leaves people sour. And it ruins the credibility of the magazine, at least in my opinion.
But let me go ahead and tell you, shut your bitch ass up!
Because it's not seen as some credible source for gaming information. It's more so seen as this gimmick that's thrown in to woo you into spending more money. I want to buy it and I want to read it, but what's the point of doing both if it's just easier not to and look it up online? From what I've gathered, there are a bunch of passionate people over at Game Informer who really want to put out solid stuff. It's just GameStop's business model, it gets in the way. It's the acceptance that physical media as a whole is just not selling like it used to and moving on, and for the most part, they have. They've branched out heavily into their YouTube channel, website, and podcast. It may not be the same, but it's still Game Informer inherently. Unfortunately, it's not crazy to think that one day it'll be shut down completely. With each layoff, it seems GameStop is caring less and less about Game Informer, and honestly, it hurts to see. In my opinion, GameStop needs to stop focusing on this kind of stuff and put more attention towards Game Informer. There are still a ton of fans out there, myself included, who hate the current state of Game Informer and only want it to succeed. I also think GameStop should invest in the retro games market more, but that's a topic for a different video. So that's it. In its heyday, it was the magazine to read for gaming news, but nowadays it kind of collects dust on GameStop store shelves. I just want to reiterate again, I'm in no way bashing Game Informer. It just sucks to see this fantastic source of gaming news being dragged through the mud, as most of its top staff members, some of them from the OG days, getting fired or in some cases quit on their own volition. This has been crypticharry. Until next time, see ya.